Hello everyone and welcome to The Shadow, an unreleased beat-em-up for the Super Nintendo that is presumably based on the film that came out around the same time. The cutscenes are a very nice touch. We are playing the prototype, but a lot of it seems fairly polished. There is something about the game that feels unfinished to me, but that may just be an artifact of really old game design. Alright, welcome to the game proper. Something of note immediately about the game is that the enemy types are pretty much all the same guy. All of them seem to have exactly the same movesets and capabilities from what I've seen. This does change when an enemy, say, gets a gun or other weapon, but aside from that, most of the differences seem to be purely aesthetic. I'm not going to call this proof of unfinished game design because all the enemy types are in place, it's just that they have the same attacks. So that might very well have been an intentional decision. Another decision that I'm sure was intentional is that throws deal so little damage. They deal the least damage of any beat-em-up I've ever played. Throwing enemies to kill them is not a valid strategy. It's not even a valid finishing move. Your regular punches definitely deal the most damage out of all of your available attacks. I assume this is to stop you from cheesing the game. But there's also something else in the game that seems to necessitate cheesing. None of your attacks from your basic punch combo are safe. None of them are safe. They don't stun the enemies or push them back, or stop them from hitting you in return. The enemies are perfectly capable of interrupting any combo of yours, at any point in time. So where normally I would just stop using normal punches and resort to throwing enemies or kicking them instead, that doesn't work because throws don't deal any damage, and the time limit prevents me from cheesing them out with jump kicks. And make no mistake, there are so many enemies in a level that you will die if you just try to button mash your way through and tank all the hits. My solution to this, then, was to grab an enemy and then just knee them repeatedly, instead of throwing them. This is a bit difficult because enemies also seem to be able to move out of your grab at any point in time. But it's a lot better than trying to attack them directly. And it's the only safe way I've noticed to defeat them. You may have noticed we caused explosions to erupt out of us just a second ago. That's because the Shadow has an interesting feature, probably its only interesting feature, in that you can use special attacks. I'm going to use it again right here. You can see our special attack meter up there in the upper right. And we can't use another one. We don't have enough power for another. But that special attack we have equipped right now is our screen clearing attack. It can destroy most weak enemies, and you'll have to weaken stronger ones first, but it's very useful for getting rid of single waves of enemies. Unfortunately, this game has many waves of enemies. So much so that the levels really seem to drag on. And there's not really any surprises because, as I said, all the enemies tend to act the same. It's not like I'm a stranger to games where you have to cheese everybody. But usually in those games there's quite a bit of variety. So it's not particularly fun to play. It gets old kinda fast. I mean, I cheesed the hell out of Golden Axe. I pretty much cheesed every single enemy in that game. But because there was so much variety, it was still fun to play. And it was fun to figure out how to cheese the final boss in that game. But this game, after you figure it out, you just do the same thing on everybody over and over. And it gets a little tiresome. It makes me wonder whether this game design is, because this game is a prototype, whether it's kind of accidental game design. Like maybe they didn't mean for your main punch to be so useless. Maybe they didn't intend for the enemy to be able to break out of it at any point in the combo. Maybe that would have been fixed when the game got released to retail. But as it is, you can only very briefly attack enemies and none of your hits are safe. Even the only safe hits I've found, which are the ones where you knee the guy in the groin, even those are kind of hard to pull off because of the weird hit detection on grabs this game has. And you notice that guy slipped right out of my grab after I touched him. Like I said, enemies seem to be able to do that whenever they feel like it. So like I said at the start of the video, it does feel incredibly unfinished, but I'm not sure whether it's intentional, because there are certainly more cheap and irritating beat-em-ups than this. But maybe this one would have been better if it actually got released, there's no way to know. I do really like the special attacks feature. I like that there's a screen clearing attack you can use when you have a full meter, or, well, a relatively full meter. But you also have two other special attacks that seem kinda useless. And the ability to choose between multiple special attacks is kinda neat for the time period. The problem is that the other two are to turn invisible and to dash at the enemy. Dashing at a single enemy and knocking them over, compared to that, I mean, you know which one you're gonna choose, right? So in the end, it's basically just the magic potions from Golden Axe, because the only special attack worth salt is the screen clearing attack. Also, there are sometimes when you pull out guns and shoot at people or something, but this actually isn't all that different from the regular gameplay, because you don't want to be far away from the enemy when you shoot at them. That gives them a chance to shoot back. Basically what we do is the same thing we've already done. We grab them and shoot at them from close range. It's a little depressing that this mechanic changes up the game so little, but the idea is to find the way to get hit the least amount of times possible, and it turns out that it's the same way you do it without guns. Welcome to the second half of the first stage, and this goes on for another 5 minutes or so without too many changes. The only other thing I have to mention about this game is that I originally wanted to praise the fact that the Shadow has a low kick that's mapped to a separate button that you can use to knock enemies over on command. That was kinda cool. It wasn't as useful as the jump kick, but it was a neat feature, until I realized that it was a desperation attack, and then I was less impressed. When your desperation attack is significantly less useful than your jump kick, I think that's a bit of a problem. So like I said, this goes on for 5 more minutes, and I'm just gonna skip to the boss battle. Welcome to the first boss fight against Spencer. And, Spencer, well, you do the same thing with him that we've done with everyone else so far. We grab him and then shoot him. This is because, as I said, you don't want to use your guns from a distance, as that gives the enemy a chance to fire back. Ideally, you just move onto his plane and shoot him after grabbing him. And you keep doing that until he's down. It's kind of a really underwhelming boss fight. He only has one attack. Very easy to avoid it as well. But that's all I'm going to show of the Shadow. Not particularly fond of this one. Coming back to other games of the era immediately after playing Streets of Rage has been kind of a hard dip.